Chapter 16. Concealed in the cottonwoods behind the ranch house, Kittering and Harkness were watching the preparation for Wilding's trip to High Springs. Some unusual activity was in progress at the ranch. Men and horses came and went continually. Several times they saw Wilding come to the door to speak to the men, but they were too far away to overhear anything that was being said. They had been watching about an hour when they saw Plug ride into the ranch house, leading Wilding's big buckskin horse, and the foreman came out and leaned against the animal, looking up while Plug talked. They saw the rider swing his arm in a wide circle, then point down towards the corrals, and both of them understood that some sort of cattle roundup was in progress. In fact, at that very moment, dust was beginning to rise in the direction where the corral lay, partially concealed from them by the trees. Plug leaned down and helped the foreman, who was still favoring his wounded arm, into the saddle, and both of them trotted off towards the corral. Temporarily, the ranch house was left deserted and still. Harkness rolled over from his prone position. "Reckon they're going to High Springs now to see that you get strung up?" he asked. Kittering stood up. "They're bringing in some beeves," he said, "and Wilding's riding down to look them over. I got a hunch he'll send a man up to watch the house and go right into town. Let's go get inside." Harkness came up behind him, and they moved warily through the cottonwood grove to the side of the house, away from the corrals. A window opened easily, and one after the other they clambered over the sill and then dropped inside, leaving the window open in case a hasty exit became necessary. The room in which they found themselves extended along the entire front of the single-storied building. It had been used as a living room and an office by Bates, and was the same room in which Kittering had first told the ranch owner and his foreman of the adventures at Short Hill, the room in which he had perceived dimly the second link in this twisted chain of events. It contained, in addition to the table, a desk, two straight-backed chairs, a big overstuffed divan, and a chair of the same material. It was a comfortable room, but depressingly suggestive of its former owner. At the moment, however, their attention was mainly directed towards the desk that was standing against the wall. Kittering motioned towards it, in an unspoken admission that Harkness knew more about such matters than he, and that the ranger should search for the legal papers. Himself, he crossed the room, and took up the watching position at the window which looked out towards the bunkhouse and the corrals. "They're driving in a bunch of cows, all right," he announced. "I wonder if Wilding has planned to sell the cattle off and risk everything on getting that mine?" "How do you know them's Wilding's cows?" Harkness replied, busily searching through the drawers of the desks. "They're not. They're Bates' cows." "No, I mean, how do you know them cows belong to the ranch at all?" Kittering turned round to look at him. You mean maybe they're Slocum's cows?" His eyes narrowed. "Say, that's right. You were going to find out who was that W branded registered. Was it Wilding?" "Yep." Harkness nodded vigorously. "He's been rustling Slocum cows right along. Part of his idea to discourage 'em and drive 'em off the range. And now, of course, things being like they are, he just sent his buckaroos out and rounded up the whole bunch and drove 'em in. Reckon they'll spend the next day or so blotting the brands out." Kittering swore under his breath. "You find anything there yet?" he asked impatiently. "Nary a sign." Harkness pushed the last drawer shut and began a swift investigation of the furniture in the room. "Looking like old Wilding got to her first, all right." Kittering abandoned the window and came to help him. They searched through closets and books and letter files that were stacked in haphazard fashion on the floor. but nothing even remotely resembling the deed was uncovered. In the midst of this activity, they were startled by the beat of the horse's hoofs returning, and Kittering sprang to the window. "They're coming back," he reported. "There's Wilding, Plug, and 3 more. One of 'em's Ballard." "Ballard?" Harkness exclaimed. "That's the hombre we done took the cabin away from last night. Made him walk 20 miles into High Springs." An involuntary smile flitted over Kittering's face. Ballard was certainly getting the wear and tear in this war. Harkness had shut the desk, and he hurriedly pushed the chairs and papers back into order. "Come on," he whispered, striding towards the open window. "Hold up a minute." Kittering backed away from his view in the corral. "I'm plumb anxious to listen in on this little confab," he said. His nostrils flared, and he spoke in a rapid whisper with an underlying suppressed excitement. "Let's hole up some place where we can hear what's going on." Outside, the hoofbeats approached the veranda, and now the voices of the men reached them. Harkness's eyes began to dance, and his white teeth flashed. "Let her buck, cowboy," he said quietly. "In here." They went quickly through the door leading to the inner room, and then partially closed it behind them, leaving a gap about an inch or two through which they could hear and, if necessary, see. The room was a bedroom, evidently Bates', and it contained a big, old-fashioned bed, a single chair, and a dresser upon which stood a tin basin. There was one window at the foot of the bed, and Harkness silently raised it as the tramps of boots sounded on the steps outside. Then both of them took up positions alongside the door, listening and strung for immediate action in case they were to be discovered. The outer door banged open, and a rush of angry voices filled the room, and they were all talking at once. But Wilding's voice, loud and furious, dominated the rest. "One man!" he shouted. "One man makes you all look like a bunch of pilgrims. The 3 of you with rifles, and he walks in and chases you out of the cabin without so much as a fight." "Boss, I'm telling you, it wasn't just one man. There was 8 of 'em. I counted 'em. We hadn't even had a chance. They was all around us." "Ballard, you're lying. Where would Kittering get 8 men? He was alone all day. He was alone when we caught him yesterday. He let Slocum out, and Slocum went back to the cabin himself and scared you all so bad that you saw 8 more. You ain't got more guts than a darned old jackrabbit." The voices burst out again in hot denial, and then Plug broke in. "Well, there's one hombre with Kittering anyways, boss," he said. "I done seen him myself." There was a short pause, and then Wilding said more quietly, "That's right. You told me you chased Kittering and somebody else yesterday. Well, that's one man. That ain't 8. "I suppose," Ballard demanded heatedly, "I suppose you think one man busted Kittering out of jail this morning, too. Wilson said there was 8 of them, and that's just what I counted. They done tore out the whole front of the jail, the bars and all. Well, Kittering, he just dropped out of the winder right onto his horse, and had that paint pony of his ready and waiting. Knocked out old Larkin and took the horse out of the stable where the sheriff was keeping him, and I suppose you think one man done that there too, and then set the whole dang town on fire so everyone else would have to have their hands full whilst they was burning leather out of there. I suppose that's right, yeh?" He snorted in disgust. Behind the door, Kittering and Harkness grinned at one another in self-congratulations. To have made such an impression upon these roughnecks was no mean achievement, and it was praise of the highest order. Kittering was speaking again. "So Slocum got the valley back, and Kittering's loose again. That's just fine. Who's this hombre that's riding with him?" "They say his name's Harkness," Ballard replied. "Never heard of him." "I seen him real close last night when he set us on afoot, and I'd know him anywheres now. With that description Wilson gives us, he was leading the gang that got Kittering out this morning. He walked in alone at first, and He'd Wilson take him up to talk to Kittering just before they started the shooting and setting the fire. Well, the foreman drew himself up. You sure have made a mess of things, Ballard. You let Slocum get away, lost the cabin, and ain't so sure that you didn't have something to do with Kittering getting out. I think you best stick to cows. He cut the protest short. Go on now, get out of here. I need to talk to Plug. The outer door closed, cutting off the trampling of heavy feet. Then Plug asked, You think there's anything to this story about 8 men, boss? Wilson says so as well. Ah! Wilding snapped. They're both lying. Somebody, this man Harkness probably, outsmarted both of them, and they're trying to save their face by saying it was a gang. You see, Plug, you just can't depend on them jugheads to do anything right. Takes more than knowing how to throw a gun to work a thing like this right. That's why a couple of men like Kittern and Harkness are so much more dangerous than a whole pack of coyotes like we got. They let themselves get outsmarted every time. If we want something done right, it seems like we're going to have to do it ourselves. And we can't be everywhere. A chair creaked as he dropped into it. But all the same, he continued, I reckon we got Mr. Kittern where we want him now. The sheriff will take care of him and put him where he won't make us no more trouble, and then we can have Slocum put out legal with no more shooting. I'm the owner of the ranch now, and what I say goes. Only we first gotta find that deed. He pounded on the desk with his fist. I've been looking a whole darn day and most of the night, and I got no more idea than it is where than I started. We gotta have it, or we can't prove title to the ownership, nor to the box elder. Plug, I'll give you $500 extra if you find that deed. It's gotta be around here someplace. Kittering felt his arm caught in a powerful grip. He had been startled at Wilding's word, and he turned to see Harkness' eyes blazing at him. As plain as words they were shouting. Wilding ain't got it either. He don't even know where it is. He's as bad off as we are. Bates must have hit it. The ranger's fingers squeezed and crushed his arm painfully. In the excitement, they almost forgot Plug's next words. What do you want me to do, boss? Stay here and look for it? No, there ain't no time for that. I want to see Slocum and find out if he's ready to talk turkey. When he finds out how things stand with the ranch, and when he discovers he ain't got a cow left, I reckon he'll crawl. Wouldn't be nothing else for him to do. They'll be getting hungry pretty soon, too, and I wouldn't want that to happen. Wouldn't do to let that little girl go hungry. She'd make a right skinny wife. There was a hoarse chuckle, and Harkness saw Kittering's eyebrows twitch in surprise. His mouth became slightly more grim. The puncher hadn't understood at first what Harkness meant when he said that Wilding was making motions in Helen's direction, and now he knew. Both of them realized something else. This sudden interest in Helen meant that Wilding was going to give Slocum breathing space while he tried to win over his daughter. And for the present, at least, they need fear no more attacks on the cabin. A lull was in order. If in this time they succeeded in finding the deed before Plug and Wilding found it, they could prove Slocum's right to box elder if, that is, they weren't caught by the sheriff's posse or the ever-vigilant cowboys from the ranch itself. It was not exactly a cheerful prospect, but it was an improvement, however, although slight. They had a definite job to do, and a fairly defiant time in which to do it, and how long depended upon how long Wilding's patience would hold out under the rebuffs from both Helen and her father. For Kittering saw more clearly than Wilding that Slocum would never crawl. That profane and violent man would never retreat. He didn't know what defeat meant. He would throw Wilding and his proposition out bodily unless An idea struck Kittering. Unless he was tipped off to string Wilding along so as to gain time. A few days more now might make all the difference between finding and losing the deed. Kittering made a slight motion with his hand to Harkness, and they snuck out cautiously across the bedroom to the window. Harkness went first, sliding his long body over the sill with the utmost care to avoid the creak of leather or the jingle of spurs. Kittering thrust his own leg over the sill to follow, and heard Wilding in the next room say, "Plug, fetch me them old black chaps out of the bedroom. I reckon we best ride over and have a talk with Slocum today." Kittering slid out the window, landed with a bump on Harkness. His sombrero vanished beneath the window ledge as the doorknob rattled under a heavy touch. As Plug stalked into the room, they were already disappeared amongst the trees. "Listen," Kittering said, "we gotta split up. Somebody's gotta haunt the ranch and hunt for that deed, and somebody's gotta keep an eye on the valley. We can take turns. You better stay here now and see if you can get into the house again. I'm going to trail those two over to the valley. Slocum's got to know about that deed, or Wilding will sure enough fool him. I'll get back fast as I can." In a moment he was gone, and Harkness again turned his attention to the ranch house, from which Wilding and Plug were now just emerging. End of chapter 16.